Mother slams her wine glass down at the birthday dinner, laughing as she tells my boss and coworkers I've been faking anxiety attacks to get attention. The sound cuts through the clink of forks and low conversation like a whip. Father joins in, voice loud enough to make the nearby tables glance over, saying my delusions explain why I still live like a college student while paying their bills, making the accounting firm partners exchange uneasy glances. Brother's girlfriend Chloe whispers loudly enough for the table to hear that my instability is why he relapsed last month. Though I know he's been sober 8 months, I saw his chip myself last Tuesday. I feel my face burn as 3 colleagues from work stare fixedly at their plates, the sudden silence in the private room making the waiter's footsteps on the tile floor sound unnervingly loud. Mother leans in, her perfume too strong, voice dripping fake concern that makes my stomach twist. We're doing this because we love you, Maya. Admitting you need help is the first step. I freeze. Realizing this isn't about my birthday, it's a performance designed to destroy my professional credibility in front of the people who sign my paychecks, the people whose opinion affects my promotion chances next quarter. The waiter refills my water glass without asking, the cold condensation sharp against my skin where I grip the stem, a ridiculous contrast to the heat flooding my neck and cheeks as I grasp the true purpose of this intervention. My name is Maya Chen. I'm 32 years old. I've worked as a senior accountant at Hale & Partners for 5 years, handling complex tax filings for mid-sized businesses. My parents see me as the family's financial safety net. I automatically transfer $1,200 on the first of each month for their mortgage in their suburban home. Another $180 covers Liam's car insurance premium, and $60 keeps his phone active. I do this while living in a $600 studio apartment 3 towns over, eating rice and beans most nights to make the numbers work, taking the bus instead of owning a car. The emotional wound isn't new. It's been there since I was 12. Whenever Liam struggled with his addiction, missed curfews, failed courses, rehab stints, they rushed to help him with money, made excuses to teachers, called it a phase. But when I earned my CPA through night classes while working 2 jobs, studying on lunch breaks and commutes, they called it expected for someone like me. Said I lacked his natural charm and ease with people, as if responsibility was a personality flaw. I constantly doubt myself now, wondering if I'm too rigid, too serious, if maybe I times harder to love than my brother, who always seems to land on his feet after crashing. Beneath that doubt lives a quiet strength I've never felt able to name. For 3 years, I've kept meticulous digital and paper records of every dollar I've sent them, bank transfer confirmations, insurance payment screenshots, even notes on what each check covered. Not because I distrusted them, but because numbers don't lie when people do, and I needed something solid to hold on to when the world felt slippery. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they never bothered to notice. I was the one who actually kept the lights on while they pretended everything was fine, the one who made sure the mortgage didn't go late, while they told stories about how generous they were. If you've ever felt like your quiet reliability was taken for granted until it became invisible, you know how this specific kind of betrayal cuts not with a shout, but with a slow leak of trust until you're standing in an empty room, wondering if you ever had anything to lose. Hit subscribe if you're here for stories where the underestimated finally see their own worth clearly, not through luck or anger, but through seeing the truth laid bare. What's one small way you've started recognizing your own value when others overlooked it? Maybe it was saying no to an extra shift, or finally taking that vacation day, or just stopping to acknowledge you did a hard thing well. Share it in the comments if you feel safe. Like this video if you believe quiet strength deserves its moment to be seen, not as a footnote in someone else's story, but as the main event. Click hype to help this story reach others who need to understand their silence isn't weakness. It's often the only thing holding them together while everyone else pretends they don't see the cracks. The restaurant's private room holds 8 witnesses packed around the oval table. My boss, Sarah Kim, a partner I've admired for years. Alex, from the audit team, whose dry humor usually makes tough weeks bearable. Jordan, who sits near me in the open office and shares my love of bad sci-fi, Chloe. Liam's girlfriend of 2 years, who I've celebrated holidays with, 2 mutual friends from college who knew us all, and my parents, Rachel and David Chen, who looked like they belonged in a different lifetime in this upscale steakhouse. Mother starts by standing, her crystal wine glass catching the soft light, her smile tight as she glances at Liam nervously. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she says, her voice pitched for the room. "We're here to support Maya through a difficult time. She's been struggling, and we love her enough to get her the help she needs." Her words land like stones. Father doesn't wait for her to sit. He pushes his half-eaten steak away with a clatter, his face flushed, voice rising past concern into accusation. "We've enabled this long enough," he declares, cutting through the uneasy murmurs. "Maya needs to accept she's broken before she can fix anything." Living in denial helps no one. Alex shifts in his seat, his knuckles white where he grips his water glass, his eyes darting to his plate like he's searching for an escape route. Later, he'd tell me he wondered if I'd been hiding a pill problem behind my careful spreadsheets and punctual reports. Mother leans forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone that somehow carries across the table. "Last week," she says, choosing her words with deliberate cruelty, "I found $200 missing from Liam's wallet. I confronted Maya about it. She admitted she took it, said she'd pay him back, but the judgment, it's just not there anymore." It's symptomatic of a larger pattern. Her eyes lock onto mine, waiting for me to deny it, to explode, to give them the reaction they clearly want. The memory is fresh. I'd found the cash folded inside a jacket Liam left at my place after dinner, returned it to his wallet the next morning while he slept, leaving a note on the fridge. But her version hangs in the air, weighted with the implication of theft, of moral failing. Sarah Kim sets her fork down slowly, the metal ringing faintly against her plate. Her professional assessment of me, someone she'd trusted with confidential client data, someone who'd uncovered a $40K discrepancy in a vendor contract last month, suddenly clouds over as she processes the implication. I see it in the way her eyebrows knit, the slight tilt of her head as she reevaluates everything she thought she knew about me. My throat closes. I can't argue here without looking guilty, defensive, unstable, the very thing they're accusing me of being. I mumble something about needing air, push my chair back with a scrape that draws every eye, and practically run to the bathroom. I lock myself in a stall, the cheap plastic cold against my palms as I brace them, pressing my burning forehead against the smooth metal of the door. The realization hits hard and slow. My reputation at work, the thing I'd built through years of meticulous effort and late nights, is being dismantled over a lie I can't publicly deny without seeming guilty or hysterical. The handicap bar digs into my hip as I stand there, breathing through my nose, trying to stop the tears that won't come. When I finally return, Liam refuses to meet my eyes, staring intently at the pattern on his napkin. Chloe pats his hand where it rests on the table, her smile tight, her eyes holding mine for a second too long, an unspoken agreement passing between them. My word means nothing against their united front. My version of events is already dismissed as delusion. The check arrives, placed squarely in front of me. Father doesn't even look at the total, he just slides it toward me with a smirk, his voice loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Since you're so good with money, Maya, you handle this." Chloe beams at her boyfriend, her voice bright and false as she thanks them. "Thanks for seeing the real me, you guys." It means so much. I pay with my debit card, the machine's harsh electronic beep echoing in the sudden quiet as I swipe, the transaction approval flashing green on the small screen. I understand now, with a clarity that chills me to the bone, this wasn't concern. It was a calculated move designed to make me question my own sanity while simultaneously destroying my standing with the people who employed me, the people whose respect I needed to advance. Walking to my car through the autumn chill, the sharp air stinging my tear-stung cheeks, I knew nothing would ever be the same with them, and worse, I couldn't unsee the doubt already flickering in Sarah Kim's eyes, the way she now watched me when she thought I wasn't looking. The emotional undermining started that very night, a slow drip of poison disguised as care. Mother's first voicemail came at 10:17 p.m., her voice sugary sweet, the kind she used when I was small and scraped my knee. "Hey there, my favorite girl," she began, before the knife twisted. "Just checking in after tonight. I know it was hard hearing those things, But it's because we love you so much. You really did overreact to that wallet thing though. Liam was so upset. And you know how sensitive he gets about money. Maybe next time you could just talk to us first? I deleted it, but the words looped in my head as I tried to sleep. The next day, while I was reconciling expense reports at my desk, my phone lit up with her name again. Maya, sweetie, she cooed. Just wanted to say I'm proud of you for facing the music tonight. It takes courage to admit when you need help. That little episode with the cash? It's not just about the money, honey. It shows a lack of impulse control we should really look into. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over decline, feeling the familiar wash of shame and confusion creep up my chest. Had I overreacted? Was I being unfair? By the third call that evening, my hands were shaking slightly as I listened to her say, "You're such a good daughter, really you are. It's just so sad to see you hurting yourself like this. If you'd let us help you find a good therapist, it could make such a difference. You're spiraling, Maya, and it's scary to watch." By Friday, the gaslighting had seeped into my bones. I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror at work, searching my own eyes for signs of the madness they insisted was there. Had I really heard Father say I was faking my CPA? Or had my anxiety, my exhaustion from juggling everything, twisted his words about my ordinary career into something darker? I caught myself apologizing to the barista for taking too long to order my coffee, to a coworker for asking a clarifying question about a report, even to my cat for knocking a pen off my desk just to stop the painful, familiar cycle of being told I was imagining the hurt, of being made to feel like the problem for feeling hurt at all. The isolation grew alongside the doubt. I started drafting resignation emails in my head during my commute, convinced I was too unstable, too much of a liability, to keep my accounting job despite the flawless performance reviews piling up in my inbox. Despite the partners specifically praising my work on the Henderson account during the last quarterly meeting, the turning point came not with a bang, but with a whisper of paranoia so quiet I almost missed it. I was leaving the office late one Tuesday, the building empty except for the security guard making his rounds, when I paused outside the IT closet. For no logical reason I could name, I found myself wondering if my work laptop had monitoring software installed keystroke loggers, screen recorders really believing for a moment. The narrative they'd woven, that I was untrustworthy, that I was hiding something, that I deserved to be watched. The thought terrified me not because I thought it was true, but because a part of me, worn down by days of their voices in my head, wondered if maybe I did deserve it. The social exclusion wasn't a slamming door. It was the slow fading of sunlight, the gradual realization that the room was emptying while you weren't looking. It started with the group text for Liam's birthday brunch, a bottomless mimosa thing at a trendy cafe I'd actually suggested to him months ago. Everyone was listed. Liam, Chloe, our mutual friends from college, even my parents. Everyone except me. I stared at the notification, my thumb hovering over the screen as Chloe's comment glowed underneath. "Hope the birthday boy doesn't scare off the nice girls this time. Some of us are trying to actually have fun." My chest felt tight, not just from the exclusion, but from the casual cruelty of linking my supposed instability to his dating life, a narrative I knew was false. As Liam had been dating Chloe steadily for over a year, his recovery seeming solid. The next day, Mother posted a Facebook album from the intervention dinner, the kind of public performance that made my skin crawl. She'd tagged me in a photo where I looked startled, mid-sip of water, my eyes wide as Father spoke. Her caption read, "In that perfect blend of piety and accusation, family love means honest conversations, even when hard. Proud of Maya for taking this step towards healing. Number tough love, number family support." The comments rolled in friends saying, "You guys are amazing parents." Others offering prayer emojis. I didn't comment. I couldn't trust my voice not to shake. Jordan from work mentioned it at the coffee machine the following week, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. "Hey, Sarah asked me if you were thinking about taking some time off," he said, his brows furrowed with concern. "She's worried about you after what your family shared. Said she noticed you seemed off lately." My stomach dropped. Sarah Kim, my boss, my ally, was now questioning my stability based on what my family had told her. I mumbled something about being fine, poured my coffee too fast, and burned my tongue. The holiday invitations stopped coming altogether. Thanksgiving rolled around, and despite knowing I wasn't expected, I found myself driving past their house around 4 p.m., drawn by habit, by the hopeless hope that maybe this year would be different. I knocked. Father opened the door, his expression shifting from surprise to annoyance as he took in my presence, me in my coat, holding a store-bought pie I'd bought on impulse. "Maya," he said, his voice flat, "we didn't expect you. We already ordered too much food, and Liam's bringing a friend from his meeting. There just isn't room." He didn't invite me in, didn't offer to take the pie, just stepped slightly to the side as if to let me pass, his eyes already scanning past me to the street. The words hung in the crisp autumn air. "There isn't room for you. Not at the table, not in the family, not in their story." Chloe blocked me on all social media platforms after I made a simple, factual comment on a post Liam had shared, celebrating his 8-month sober milestone, a comment that merely linked to a reputable addiction recovery resource. Nothing personal, nothing accusatory. Her action was silent, final, and spoke volumes. I was not part of his support system, not part of his life, not even worthy of seeing his curated online presence. The exclusion wasn't loud or dramatic. It lived in the absence, the unreturned texts that sat for days before getting a vague, busy reply, the calls that went straight to voicemail. The way friends who used to text me memes or invite me for coffee suddenly had other plans whenever I reached out, the birthday wishes that stopped appearing on my wall. I realized with a sickening clarity that they weren't just distancing themselves from me, they were actively rewriting the narrative. In their version, I wasn't the reliable one who paid the bills while living frugally. I was the unstable one who had chosen to walk away, who was too difficult, too broken, to be part of the family unit. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting, knowing I was fulfilling my obligations while being painted as the abandoner. Walking past their house one evening, a few weeks later, trying to distract myself from the relentless loop of their voices in my head, I stopped dead on the sidewalk. A smell wrapped around me, rich, savory, deeply familiar. Liam's favorite beef barley soup simmering on the stove, the scent of thyme and black pepper that used to mean I was welcome inside, that used to signal a shared meal, a moment of belonging. It hit me like a physical blow, sudden and sharp, standing there on the cold sidewalk. I could almost hear the murmur of voices inside, the clink of spoons against bowls, the warmth of the kitchen light spilling onto the snow-dusted porch steps. And I knew, with a certainty that stole my breath, that I was no longer part of that warmth. I was outside looking in, the smell a cruel reminder of what I had lost, or rather, what they had decided I no longer deserved. Instead of knocking, instead of pleading for a scrap of their time or affection, I turned and walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, the engine off, the interior slowly chilling to match the autumn air, and opened a new note on my phone. I locked it with a password I wouldn't forget, but they couldn't guess. I began typing, not with anger, but with the dull, aching precision of someone documenting a wound. Date, time, what happened, how it made me feel, who was involved. Each entry felt less like retaliation and more like an act of self-preservation, a way to anchor myself in reality when their version of events threatened to wash me away. The attempted erasure wasn't about emotions anymore, it was about my livelihood, my professional standing, the thing I'd worked hardest to build. It started with a phone call to my boss, Sarah Kim, placed while I was supposedly at therapy according to the narrative Mother had been spinning. I found out about it 3 days later when Sarah requested a meeting, her usual warm professionalism tinged with unease. "Maya," she began, choosing her words carefully as we sat in the small conference room off the main floor. "I got a call from your mother yesterday." She was quite concerned. Her eyes searched mine, waiting for my reaction. She mentioned some concerns about your handling of company funds. Suggested I might want to keep an eye on your expense reports, just to be sure everything was on the up and up. The blood drained from my face. Using company funds to cover personal debts? The accusation was so specific, so absurd, given my meticulous nature, that for a second I almost laughed, but the look on Sarah's face, the way she was genuinely trying to reconcile this with the employee she knew, stopped me. She didn't accuse me, she presented it as a concern relayed by family, a duty of care. But the seed was planted. The next Monday, Sarah stopped by my desk, unannounced, a folder in her hand. "Just doing a routine quarterly audit," she said, her tone light but her eyes scanning my screen with unusual intensity. "Nothing to worry about, just standard procedure given recent conversations." My heart hammered against my ribs as she opened my Q3 expense report spreadsheet. I watched her finger trace down the columns, her brow furrowed, not in anger, but in confusion, then gradual relief. After 20 minutes, she closed the folder, smiled tightly, and said, "Everything looks perfect, Maya. Thank you for your patience." She left, but the damage was done. The doubt was no longer just in my head. It had entered the professional sphere, a whisper that could grow into a shout if fed. Later that week, while reviewing my own financial records, a habit born of self-preservation, I made a chilling discovery. Liam's car insurance payment, which I'd been covering silently for months, showed as paid through the end of October. But I knew I hadn't made the September payment. I'd been distracted, overwhelmed by the fallout from the birthday dinner, and had simply forgotten. Yet the coverage showed as active. Confused, I logged into the insurance portal using the credentials I'd secretly saved, not for malicious reasons, but because Liam was terrible with passwords, and I'd had to reset it for him once when he was stranded. The payment history showed a clear $180 debit from my checking account on September 15th, the exact date I'd sworn I'd missed. I'd paid it. I had the confirmation email buried in my folder. But why had I thought I hadn't? Had I been so stressed I'd misremembered? Or had someone else accessed my account? Father's text came 2 days later, casual as could be, while I was waiting for my bus outside the office building. "Hey, Maya," it read, "since you're so good at handling money, could you cover Liam's deductible after his little fender bender? We're a bit short this month. Thanks." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The deductible was $500. I had the money in my savings money I was supposed to be using to finally replace the balding tires on my 10-year-old Honda, but paying it would mean stepping back into their game, acknowledging their manipulation while receiving zero gratitude, zero acknowledgement that I was the one consistently making sure these obligations were met. It would feel like conceding defeat, like admitting that my refusal to pay was the problem, not their expectation that I would always cover for them without question. I almost typed, "Sure thing," almost hit send, driven by the old, deep-seated urge to make things smooth, to avoid conflict, to be the good daughter. Then I paused. I looked at the screen, at the simple request for money that carried so much weight. Instead of replying, I did something different. I opened my secure folder on my laptop, the one holding the payment records I'd been quietly compiling. I took a screenshot of the bank transfer showing September's car insurance payment, clearly labeled and dated. I saved another showing the mortgage payment I'd made the week prior. I opened Liam's insurance portal again and screenshotted the active policy status, noting the payment date. I didn't send them to anyone. I didn't confront them. I simply filed them away in a subfolder labeled Proof, feeling less like I was preparing for battle and more like I was building a levee against a tide that kept trying to pull me under. Each saved file, each screenshot, felt less like aggression and more like an act of self-defense, a way to remind myself, in cold, hard pixels and numbers, what was real when their words tried to convince me otherwise. I chose documentation over confrontation not because I was cold, but because I'd learned, through painful repetition, that emotional appeals, pleas for fairness, attempts to make them see my side, only ever gave them more ammunition to use against me. Numbers, dates, timestamps, those were harder to twist, harder to dismiss as paranoia or exaggeration. They were facts that existed independently of their narratives. I stopped reacting to their calls and texts, not with a dramatic declaration, but with a gradual fading, like a star burning out its fuel. I let their calls go to voicemail, their messages sit unread, not out of anger, but because I realized engaging only fed the cycle. Each time I tried to explain, to defend myself, to point out the lies or the inconsistencies, I ended up feeling smaller, more confused, more like I was the one who needed fixing. So I stopped trying to change their minds and started observing instead. I began to see the pattern with painful clarity. Their attacks always followed the same tired script. First, accuse me of instability of being overly emotional, paranoid, irrational. Second, cite a minor, often misunderstood incident as proof of this instability, the wallet episode, a forgotten payment, a tone of voice taken out of context. Third, position themselves not as accusers, but as concerned helpers, the only ones brave enough to tell me the truth I refuse to see, the ones suffering because of my unwillingness to get help. It was a loop designed to keep me off balance, to make me question my own perception while they remained firmly in control of the narrative. I noticed it most starkly during a routine Sunday afternoon visit, a visit I still made, not out of hope, but out of an ingrained sense of duty and the practical need to drop off groceries I paid for with my own money, the kind of basics they seemed to forget existed when Liam had a crisis. I was setting bags on their kitchen counter, noting the half-empty wine glasses already out despite the early hour, when Mother checked her phone with a furtive glance as Father walked in late, his jacket damp from rain. Later, when I casually asked if he'd had trouble finding parking, she smiled too brightly and said, "Oh, he was just held up at work, finishing up a report." The lie hung in the air, fragile and obvious, especially when I remembered her mentioning just an hour earlier that he had the afternoon off to relax and recharge. That moment, small as it was, became the catalyst. I realized that if I was going to protect myself, not to hurt them, but to stop believing their lies about me, I needed to gather my own evidence. Not to retaliate in kind, but to create an unshakable foundation of truth beneath my feet. I began using my phone's voice memo feature during visits, a habit I'd never had before. I'd leave my phone face down in my bag or purse, resting quietly against my side or tucked into a pocket, recording the ambient sound of our interactions. It felt sneaky at first, like I was betraying their trust, but I reminded myself I was a participant in these conversations. In my state, one-party consent made these recordings legally admissible. I wasn't hiding in closets or planting bugs. I was simply present, quiet, and letting technology capture what unfolded naturally. The first truly valuable recording came 2 weeks later, during a tense Sunday dinner where the air was thick with unspoken words. Father mentioned, over his salad, that he had to leave early for a business trip to a client site in the next state. Mother nodded, her eyes flicking to her phone, where she was scrolling through pictures of Liam and Chloe at a pumpkin patch. Later that evening, when I called to check if he'd arrived safely, a habit from before the trust had shattered, she sounded surprised. "Business trip?" she echoed, her voice tight. "I thought he was working late at the office to finish that audit. You must have misunderstood." The dissonance was jarring, and my phone, resting in my bag on the chair beside me, had captured it all: the specific mention of the trip, her later denial, the underlying tension I hadn't even registered consciously at the time. I started printing hard copies too, something tactile I could hold when doubt crept in. 3 months' worth of payment records, mortgage transfers dated the first of each month, car insurance payments showing my name as the payer, phone bill receipts. I laid them out on my kitchen table one evening, the stark columns of numbers and dates, speaking a language louder than any argument. I scheduled a meeting with an employment lawyer for the following Tuesday, not to sue, but to understand my protections. I told Sarah Kim I needed to discuss potential FMLA options for a family matter, a vague, plausible reason that wouldn't raise alarms but got me the time I needed. I didn't reveal what I was gathering. I didn't need to. My strategy wasn't to ambush them with proof. It was to stop defending myself against their accusations and start building a reality where their words would eventually collide with the undeniable truth of what they themselves were doing and saying. The shift wasn't heralded by a dramatic declaration or a burst of anger. It was quiet, almost invisible, the deliberate click of the voice memo apps starting as I walked in the door, the slight shift in my posture from defensive to observant, the growing weight of evidence accumulating in my desk drawer and secure digital folder, a silent testament to the fact that I was no longer willing to let their version of events be the only one that mattered. My ally wasn't someone who marched into battle beside me. It was someone who, through quiet observation and professional integrity, refused to let the narrative they were spinning go unchallenged in the space where it could hurt me most, my job. Sarah Kim, my boss at Hale & Partners, the woman who had trusted me with sensitive client data and promoted me to senior accountant 2 years ago, approached me not with fanfare, but with the careful concern of someone who noticed a discrepancy between the person she knew and the story being told. She pulled me aside 2 days after the birthday intervention, her usual brisk walk slowing as she fell into step with me heading towards the break room. Her eyes were steady, her voice low but firm. "Maya," she began, cutting straight to the point. "I've been thinking about what happened at your family's gathering the other night. And I want you to know something. I've reviewed your work history here. Going back 5 years, I've looked at your performance metrics, your error rates, the feedback from clients and partners. I found zero cause for concern about your reliability, your judgment, or your professionalism." Her words were a balm to the raw places their accusations had scraped open. She didn't stop there. She shared something specific that undercut Mother's latest lie at its source. "When your mother called me yesterday," Sarah continued, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion, "she expressed worries about you possibly misusing company funds. Suggested I might want to glance over your expense reports more closely." She paused, letting that sink in. "I did exactly that, Maya. I pulled up your reports for the last 6 months, cross-referenced them with receipts and internal system logs. And I want to be absolutely clear. The allegation was completely baseless. Your records are impeccable. Every dollar is accounted for, every policy followed perfectly." The relief was almost physical, a loosening of the knot that had lived in my chest since that call. But her most powerful validation came quietly, almost offhandedly, as she handed me a refill on her coffee. "You've handled the Henderson account flawlessly for 18 months, she said, her voice warm with genuine respect. "I trust your professional judgment completely. Don't let anyone, family or otherwise, make you doubt that." I felt it then, a tiny spark catching in the dry tinder of my self-belief. Maybe I wasn't as broken as they said. Maybe my carefulness wasn't a flaw, but a strength. I noticed Mother's behavior shift subtly but significantly in the weeks that followed. She grew bolder in her storytelling, her need to control the narrative intensifying as her usual tactics failed to provoke the reactive, apologetic responses she expected. She'd tell neighbors at the community garden with a sigh of martyrdom, "Maya's finally agreed to get the help she needs." It's been so hard watching her struggle. She'd share exaggerated versions of my supposed struggles with the book club ladies' tales of missed workdays, erratic behavior, financial irresponsibility that bore no resemblance to the person who showed up early every Monday morning, coffee in hand, ready to tackle the week's workload. Sarah Kim didn't fuel this arrogance by confronting Mother directly. She wasn't that kind of boss. But her quiet professionalism, her unwavering trust in my work as demonstrated through my actions and outputs, became a silent counterweight. When Mother stopped by the office unannounced 2 weeks later, insisting she just wanted to check on Maya's progress and see if she looked better, Sarah greeted her with her usual warmth, but drew a clear, polite line. "Of course, Rachel," she said, her voice pleasant but her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "I'm glad you came by. However, I need to remind you that HR policy strictly prohibits discussing any employee's personal health matters, including attendance or performance, with family members. It's for everyone's protection and privacy." She offered to take Mother's coat, suggested she wait in the lobby while she checked if I was available for a quick hello, which, of course, I wasn't, as I was in a client meeting Mother knew nothing about, and smoothly redirected the conversation to neutral topics like the weather or the upcoming holiday schedule. Mother left after 10 minutes, her attempt to probe thwarted not by anger, but by an immovable barrier of policy and professionalism that Sarah upheld without wavering. The turning point in our alliance came when Sarah, sensing my need for concrete protection without wanting to escalate things unnecessarily, offered something practical. "If you ever do need to dispute any claims they make about your work performance or reliability, she said during a routine check-in, her eyes meeting mine over the rim of her mug. "I'm willing to be a witness. I can review any concerning emails or voicemails they send, attest to your actual performance based on what I observe daily, and confirm that their characterizations don't match the employee I know and value." It wasn't a promise to fight their battles for me. It was an offer to stand beside me in the realm of facts, where my competence was visible and undeniable. Our understanding deepened when she suggested in that same conversation that I document any further workplace-related comments from my family, saving screenshots of texts, noting dates and times of calls, saving voicemails. "It's not about preparing for a fight," she explained, her tone pragmatic. "It's about creating a clear record. It protects you, yes, but it also protects the firm from potential complications down the line if things escalate." We scheduled a preliminary meeting for the following Friday afternoon, not framed as a strategy session against my family, but as a routine check-in about my stress levels and workload management, a plausible reason that wouldn't raise eyebrows, but bought me the time I needed to solidify my plans. Her steady, unwavering belief in my competence, rooted in what she saw me do every day, not what my family said I was, became an anchor. It counteracted the relentless, wearing down questioning of my sanity from home, giving me the quiet certainty I needed to proceed with my evidence-gathering plan, not as an act of war, but as an act of self-preservation, a way to ensure that when the truth eventually surfaced, it would be supported by more than just my word against theirs. The setting for the climax was deliberate, almost poetic in its cruel symmetry. The same private room at the same upscale steakhouse, where the birthday intervention had torn apart my professional standing in front of witnesses. This time, it was billed as a family reconciliation dinner, arranged through Chloe, who had apparently convinced them that I was ready to make amends, to finally accept their help. The air felt different as I walked in, not hopeful, but wary, alert. I chose my seat carefully, the same one I'd occupied months ago, and placed my phone face up on the table in front of me, not hidden, not aggressive, but simply there, a silent declaration that I was no longer playing by their old rules. Mother opened with her practiced, serene smile, the one she used when presenting a united front to the world. Her voice was smooth, designed to soothe and manipulate. "We've all been thinking, Maya," she began, her eyes sweeping the table to include Liam, Chloe, and our 2 mutual friends from college. "Maybe it's time to stop the blame game and start fresh. We just want what's best for you." Father followed, his voice thick with an emotion that felt rehearsed, almost theatrical in its sincerity, as he leaned forward, his hands clasped pleadingly on the tablecloth. "We just want what's best for you," he echoed, his gaze intense and pleading. "Why don't you tell us what you need from us to feel supported? We're ready to listen." The words hung in the air, thick with false openness, designed to lure me into a trap where any resistance would prove their point about my unreasonableness. I remained calm, my breathing slow and steady, despite the memories screaming beneath my skin. I didn't rise to the bait of their false openness. Instead, I kept my voice level, devoid of anger or accusation, merely stating a fact as if commenting on the weather. "Actually," I said, the words cutting through the manufactured tension like a knife through butter, "I think it's time you heard what you've been saying when you think I'm not listening." I didn't wait for their reaction. I didn't give them time to manufacture denial or outrage. I simply tapped the screen of my phone, face up and visible to all, and pressed play on the first recording I'd saved, a recording made during a seemingly innocuous Sunday visit weeks prior, when they'd assumed the conversation was safe, private, and forgotten the moment it ended. Mother's voice filled the room, clear and devoid of the performative concern she'd shown tonight. It lacked the warmth, the faux sympathy. It was just a woman speaking casually to her son, her words edged with frustration and a sense of entitlement that was chilling in its banality. "I took the $5,000 from Mom's emergency fund last Tuesday," she stated, the words falling into the sudden silence like stones into still water. "Liam needs it more than that old woman does. She's got plenty saved up. It's just sitting there doing nothing." The impact was immediate and visceral. Father's head snapped towards Mother so fast I feared he'd strain his neck. The color drained from his face, leaving it pale and shocked, his eyes wide as he processed the accusation leveled at the woman who was supposed to be his partner, his wife of nearly 40 years. His lips parted, but no sound came out initially. When he finally found his voice, it was a hoarse, disbelieving whisper, laced with hurt and betrayal that felt startlingly real. "You said it was for his car repair," he breathed, the accusation hanging between them, sharp and undeniable. Mother's denial, which had been forming on her lips, died instantly as the second recording began to play, this one capturing Father's voice, recorded during a late evening when he thought he was alone in the study, venting to a friend over the phone, his guard completely down. His voice was low, confidential, tinged with guilt and excitement, utterly devoid of the remorse he was now feigning. "The thing with Jennifer at work," he said, the name slipping out casually, like discussing the weather, "it's just stress relief. She gets me in ways you never have. It's not serious, just something to make me feel alive again." The words struck Mother like a physical blow. Her hands, which had been resting calmly on the table, clenched suddenly into tight fists, her knuckles whitening against her skin. Her eyes, wide and shining with unshed tears, locked onto Father's face, searching for any sign that this was a mistake, a misunderstanding, anything but the awful truth laid bare by his own voice. Her voice when it came was a trembling whisper, raw with shock and a hurt that seemed to eclipse everything else. "You lied to me about working late?" She breathed, the question devastating in its simplicity, cutting through years of shared history and trust. The dam broke then not with my voice, but with Liam's. His chair scraped back loudly as he shoved it away from the table, his face a mask of fury and betrayal that seemed to surprise even him as he leapt to his feet. His voice was loud, raw, shaking with emotion that felt terrifyingly genuine. "You've been covering for me while I've been using again?" he yelled, pointing alternately at each parent, his accusations flying fast and furious. "I told you I was clean. I told you I was going to meetings. But you've been giving me money, making excuses, pretending everything's fine while I've been snorting cocaine twice last month. You're not helping me, you're killing me." The domino effect hit with the force of a collapsing house of cards. Mother's anger, previously directed at me, snapped sideways towards Father with terrifying speed. "You've been wasting our savings on that office floozy?" She shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch I'd never heard from her before, thick with disgust and hurt. While I was stealing from my own mother to try and help my son? Father's face, moments ago pale with shock, now flushed a deep red as he lunged to his feet, his hands gesturing wildly. "Stealing? You took $5,000 from Times Mother's emergency fund. That was her Times security, Rachel, not some slush fund for your son's habits." Liam, still standing, his chest heaving, turned his fury towards both of them, his voice dripping with contempt. "And you two sit here and act like I'm the problem? Like I'm the one who needs fixing? You're both lying, stealing, using each other, you're a mess. And you've got the nerve to tell Times I need help?" The air in the room was thick with shouting, accusations flying back and forth like shrapnel, the mutual friends shrinking back in their seats, eyes wide and scared, Chloe looking between Liam and his parents with a look of horrified realization, her hand flying to her mouth. Amidst the glorious, terrifying chaos of them turning on each other, their united front shattering, not with my words, but with the undeniable truth of their own voices and actions, I didn't raise my voice to compete with theirs. I didn't need to. I simply stood up slowly, deliberately, my movements calm and deliberate against the backdrop of their disintegrating facades. My voice, when it came, was low, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion, just a statement of fact, delivered with the quiet authority of someone presenting evidence in a courtroom. "Effective immediately," I announced, my voice cutting through the shouting like a blade through silk. "I am ending all financial support. I've already notified your mortgage company and your car insurance provider." The words landed not with a bang, but with the finality of a gavel dropping. Mother's damage control attempt was immediate and pitiful, a reflexive grab for the old dynamics that no longer applied. She reached across the table towards me, her face a mess of tears and rage, her voice shrill and desperate as she fumbled for her phone. "You can't do that!" she protested, her words losing all coherence. "We're family! You're overreacting! This is crazy! You need help! Look at what you're doing!" She tapped frantically at her screen, clearly intending to call someone, maybe Liam's sponsor, maybe a mutual friend to rally support, to paint me as the unstable one lashing out. But the moment had passed. The proof was out. Their secrets were exposed not as allegations, but as their own voices, their own admissions. Their attempts to rewrite the narrative, to cast me as the unstable aggressor, were obliterated by the irrefutable reality of what they had said and done when they thought no one who mattered was listening. I didn't wait to see if her call went through. I didn't engage with her hysteria. I simply met Sarah Kim's eyes across the table. She had arrived 10 minutes early, a quiet presence in the corner booth I discreetly texted the night before and gave her the smallest, most imperceptible nod of confirmation. A silent acknowledgement that I had done what I said I would, that the proof was real, that the boundary was being set. Then I turned, picked up my coat from where I draped it over my chair, and walked out of the private room without looking back, without waiting for a final word, without giving them the satisfaction of seeing me shaken or emotional. The door clicked shut behind me with a sound that felt unnervingly loud in the sudden quiet that followed their argument. The last sound I heard as I walked down the hallway towards the exit was Father's voice, raw and broken, no longer directed at Mother in anger, but turned inward in bewildered loss. A whisper so quiet I almost missed it, amidst the fading echoes of their fight. "How much else have you taken?" The measurable shifts began almost immediately, concrete actions that couldn't be argued with or reinterpreted through their lens of emotional manipulation. 3 days later, while I was reviewing my morning emails at my desk, a notification popped up from my bank, a message from the mortgage servicing company. It confirmed, in clear, bureaucratic language, that effective immediately, the monthly payment for the property at their address had been switched from third-party payment, my account, to direct billing from the homeowners themselves. Attached was a copy of the authorization form I'd submitted, signed, and dated, along with proof of ownership I'd compiled from county records, and my own payment history showing I'd been the sole source of funds for years. The shift wasn't negotiable. It was a factual change in who was financially responsible for the roof over their heads. The very next day, an email arrived from Liam's car insurance provider, a formal notice of impending cancellation. It stated, in unambiguous terms, that policy number would be terminated effective 10 days from the date of the notice due to non-payment of the premium. It included clear instructions for the policyholder, Liam, on how to establish his own coverage, payment options, and links to state-assigned risk pools if he struggled to find a provider willing to cover him, given his recent history. The safety net I had silently provided for months was being withdrawn, not through negotiation or pleading, but through the automatic operation of contractual terms triggered by non-payment terms I had simply stopped overriding with my own money. Later that afternoon, while I was taking a short break from work, my personal email chimed with a message from an address I didn't recognize, a forwarded screenshot from Chloe's phone. It showed a text thread between her and Liam. His message was stark, devoid of the usual emojis or casual tone. "My parents are fighting non-stop over money and Jen. I need a place to crash. Jennifer from work. The woman named in Father's recording." The implication hung in the air. The facade of unity was utterly shattered. The financial interdependence I had maintained was gone. And Liam, the person whose struggles had been used to justify their control over me, was now seeking refuge not from his parents, but from his girlfriend, because the people who were supposed to be his safety net were too busy tearing each other apart to notice he was drowning. That same evening after work, I stood in front of my apartment door, the one I'd shared with no one but myself for the past year. I ran my hand over the existing deadbolt, a standard builder-grade model that had given me basic security, but always felt slightly temporary, like I was waiting for something better or expecting to move on. Then, I switched it out. I installed a new, heavier deadbolt, a solid brass model with a reinforced strike plate, the kind recommended by the local police department's crime prevention unit. As I turned the key in the new lock for the first time, I felt it the deep, solid times, thunk times, of the bolt sliding fully into the doorframe, the unyielding resistance of the metal, the tangible sense of finality. It wasn't symbolic. It was a physical barrier I had chosen and paid for, a clear demarcation between my space and the world outside. The cool metal of the knob under my palm, the slight resistance as I turned it to engage the lock fully, the quiet times, snick times as it settled, these were small, sensory affirmations of a boundary that was now mine to enforce. At work the following Monday, Sarah Kim found me at the end of the day, not in my usual workspace, but by the printer where I was grabbing a report. She didn't make a big deal of it. Her tone was casual, professional, the kind of conversation we'd had 1,000 times before about workload or client queries. But her words carried a weight that settled deep in my bones. "Hey!" she said, glancing around to make sure we weren't within earshot of others. "Just wanted to let you know I shut down any further inquiries from your family about your work status or performance. Nothing's come through since Friday, but I made it clear to anyone asking that your performance speaks for itself. No drama needed, no concerns warranted." She gave my shoulder a brief, almost imperceptible, squeeze, a gesture of solidarity, not pity, before turning back to her desk. The unspoken message was clear. In the professional sphere, where my value was measured by output and reliability, the narrative they had tried to impose held no sway. I was seen, I was trusted, I was valued, not for what they claimed I was, but for what I demonstrably did. The peaceful sensory detail came not in a grand moment, but in the ordinary quiet of a Sunday morning, 2 weeks after the restaurant. I was in my own kitchen, the one I paid for, the one I maintained, the one that belonged solely to me. The smell of fresh coffee brewing filled the air, a rich, dark aroma that was mine to enjoy, not something I was making for others while going without myself. I stood at the sink, washing a single mug from my breakfast, and listened not to the distant traffic or the hum of the refrigerator, but to the clear, cheerful chirping of sparrows in the bush outside my window. It was a simple, ordinary sound, one I had heard 1,000 times before, but this time it registered differently. It wasn't background noise. It was part of a moment that was entirely, peacefully mine. There was no dread coiling in my stomach as I anticipated a call or a text. There was no phantom ache of guilt for setting a boundary. There was only the quiet, profound certainty that I was responsible for no one but myself. My hands in the warm, soapy water felt steady, capable. My breath came easy. The weight I had carried for years, the weight of being the silent provider while being accused of instability, the weight of proving my worth to people who refused to see it hadn't vanished. But it had fundamentally shifted. It was no longer a burden I bore in silence, hoping for acknowledgement that never came. It was a strength I now recognized as my own, rooted in my actions, my consistency, my refusal to break under pressure, and it belonged entirely to me. When Mother's text came 3 days later, a simple, direct request that cut through any pretense of reconciliation. "Hey Maya, emergency. Can you send $800 for the mortgage?" Liam's short again. "Please." My response was not born of anger, not of a desire to hurt, but of a calm, unshakable clarity honed by weeks of preparation and the irrefutable proof of what was real. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I didn't leave room for negotiation or guilt tripping. I typed out 2 short sentences, sent them, and then put my phone face down on my coffee table, the screen going dark as I turned my attention back to the book I was reading. My boundary statement was simple, final, and utterly devoid of emotion. I no longer provide financial support. Please contact Liam or seek community resources. I sat on my fire escape that evening, the city lights blinking softly in the distance, the brick wall rough against my palms as I leaned back, looking out not at their neighborhood, but at the expanse of my own sky. The strength I had doubted for so long, the strength I had mistaken for rigidity, for lack of charm, for being too much or not enough, wasn't something I had suddenly acquired. It had been there all along, quiet and steady, woven into the fabric of who I was. The person who showed up, who paid the bills, who kept the records, who did the hard thing without fanfare or expectation of reward. I hadn't found it in that restaurant room. I had simply stopped giving it away to those who refused to see it, stopped pouring my effort into a bottomless pit labeled family that gave nothing back but criticism and doubt. I realized, with a quiet amazement that settled deep in my bones, that I didn't need their validation to know my worth. I had been the one keeping the lights on all along. And now, finally, the light was shining on me, too steady, clear, and undeniably mine. If you've ever been the quiet one holding things together while others took your reliability for granted, this story is for you, not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder that your steadiness is not invisible, even when it feels that way. Have you ever gathered proof not to retaliate, but to finally believe your own experience when others called you crazy? I'd love to hear your story in the comments how you found your way back to trusting yourself when the world tried to convince you otherwise. Your experiences matter deeply. Sharing them helps others recognize when what's been framed as support has actually turned into slow, steady exploitation, and that seeing the truth is the first step towards reclaiming your peace. Subscribe for more narratives where the underestimated reclaim their power not through luck or fury, but through patience, preparation, and the quiet certainty of knowing their own value. Click Hype to help this story reach others who need to understand that walking away isn't giving up, it's finally choosing yourself. And that sometimes, the most revolutionary act is simply stopping the flow of your energy towards those who refuse to see or honor what you bring. Your thoughts and experiences make this community meaningful. What's one small boundary you've set recently that protected your peace, even if it felt uncomfortable or scary at first to put in place? If this resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to see their own quiet strength reflected back at them. Someone who's been wondering if their patience and reliability are being mistaken for weakness or acquiescence. Remember, being reliable doesn't mean being available for endless demands at the cost of your own well-being. It means knowing your worth well enough to say no when the scale tips too far, and doing so without apology or endless justification. Let's keep creating space for stories where healing begins not with forced forgiveness or fake reconciliation, but with the quiet, powerful act of finally seeing your own worth clearly and having the courage to build your life around that truth instead of around someone else's distorted version of it. Click Hype to help this story reach others who need it.